Hey everyone, how's it going? It's Anthony Cosenza with the Orange and Black Insider with you once again. We are live on YouTube and on Cincy Jungle, so we are happy to have you joining us. I am flying solo tonight, I believe, folks, so I'm going to need some of your help. Unfortunately, my co-host, my usual co-host, Scott Schulte, could not. I don't believe he's going to be able to make it tonight due to a last-minute scheduling conflict, so I am on my own, believe it or not, tonight, and you only get to see my ugly mug all night. So I apologize for that. But we're still going to talk about a bunch of stuff, and I'm happy that you are able to join us. So we're still gonna do listener questions and all of that. So with me flying solo tonight, I'm gonna rely on you all as my co-hosts for the evening to ask your Bengals questions as we are so close into training camp. There's, even though it's a little slower period, there's still some stuff going on, some interesting stuff. And you get this time of year, you kind of get an interesting look into some of what the players do with their off-season time or their time between training camp. You see them, if you've read their social media or gone on cincyjungle.com to see some of the things that they've been doing. Obviously, they're doing their own private workouts. You got Drake Kirkpatrick dabbling now into modeling, which is pretty interesting, but good for him. And a lot of different stuff. Guys are going on trips and getting all of that in before they're obviously they're going to be in Cincinnati doing training camp. So again, a lot of different stuff going on. I again am for now on my own. Scott Schulte might be joining us later. He has a scheduling conflict, so hopefully he can hop on and we can talk about some things back and forth. But I want some questions from you. I want some commentary from you in the Cincy Jungle comment thread, in the YouTube chat. You can also hit up the Orange and Black Insider Twitter at BengalsOBI. We'll be monitoring that as well. Just before we kind of get to some of the things we were going to talk about tonight, one of the things I wanted to start with the show is with Corey Dillon kind of reaching back out to the Bengals and vice versa. The Bengals kind of reaching back out with them for those who've been following the team. The team is doing, since they're kind of celebrating their 50th year as an NFL franchise. So they've decided to kind of do this, bring in their 50 greatest players of the past 50 years. And they reached out to Corey Dillon as one of them. Now, if you follow the Cincinnati Enquirer, you follow Paul Dehner Jr., you follow Jim Owczarski, they have a great podcast of their own. Obviously, they write a lot of stuff as the beat writers for the Cincinnati Bengals and the Enquirer. They hosted Corey Dillon on their program, and he had some interesting things to say. But the interesting thing is that he is now – the team reached out to him, and now he's kind of thawing his relationship with the Bengals based on some comments that he made with the Enquirer. So it's pretty interesting for those of you who remember Corey Dillon, obviously a great player with the Bengals, one of those overlooked players. If you remember last week, we talked about, we got a listener question on why, Andrew Whitworth and Willie Anderson and their Hall of Fame chances. And obviously, we talked about that at length. You can get that snippet on our program as well. But you look at Corey Dillon, this is another guy that could be in consideration at some point, and was a guy that was snubbed on a bunch of Pro Bowls because he was on a very poor Bengals team. I believe I counted from 1997 until 2002, before Marvin Lewis got there. The team won a total of 26 games in that span. So pretty hard times there, and unfortunately Dillon was overlooked. And he was also in a division at the time with guys like Eddie George, and Jamal Lewis was with him at the time. So a lot of different stuff going on in his career with the Bengals, but obviously it ended on a sour note. There was a time when Dillon was in contract negotiations and pretty sour on what the team was doing or not doing and not producing on the field. They had a terrible quarterback situation, a coaching carousel, all kinds of things going on, and they weren't winning games. And he was sick of it. And there were times where he said he'd rather, quote unquote, flip burgers than play for the Bengals. There was an incident right before the end of the 2003 season, or right as it ended, where he tossed his jersey into the stands and basically said to somebody and to people that were in earshot that, this is it, I'm done, and I don't want to play here anymore. That's something to that effect. So he gets traded to the New England Patriots. Obviously, the very next year he wins. He has a huge year for them. They win a Super Bowl. But the interesting thing here is obviously the relationship now with Mike Brown and Corey Dillon. And obviously, Mike Brown isn't known for being the most approachable owner, or an owner that really embraces all of his players. He does have his favorites, and he's got some guys that continue to be in his doghouse. And unfortunately, some of those guys have been some of his biggest stars. Dillon was one of them. Carl Pickens was another. Guys that were just sick of losing, sick of what had happened. Now, I think what's interesting about what Corey Dillon said, and this so-called olive branch that the Bengals reached out to him with in their invitation for this 50 greatest players over the past 50 years type of celebration they'll be doing. Obviously, Dillon's matured now. I think he's in his early 40s or something like that. It's been 13, 14 years since he suited up for the Bengals, so a lot of time has passed from all of the anger and frustration he felt in a number of different facets with the club. So, that's one aspect. And then obviously you look at it, Mike Brown has in recent years publicly said he's kind of taken a little bit of a step back in terms of day-to-day operations and certain things within the organization. And it makes you wonder now if some of these people, Marvin Lewis, Katie Blackburn, some of these other people that are kind of taking charge in other areas that Mike Brown once oversaw, maybe it's time that it's a sign of the times that they are now doing some things differently and approaching even some of the players that they didn't have the greatest relationships with. It's good to see Dillon embrace that. It's good to see the Bengals embrace him as one of their 50 greatest players, because quite frankly, he is, and probably within that top 10 type of area in terms of players for them. Unfortunately, like we said with Willie Anderson and Andrew Whitworth last episode, there's just not there's the wins weren't there, the success wasn't there by the team, and it kind of is what it is. And so unfortunately he got overlooked. He got quite a bit more fanfare when he was with the Patriots, won a Super Bowl, had a great season for them, played for them I believe for 3 more years, and then retired. But a player who should have gotten much more public accolades and media attention than he did, for a variety of different reasons. But it's for a team that doesn't seem to, or hadn't seemed to be doing things the right way with their players, with the fans, all of that sort of thing. This is a nice step to see. And it's going to be very entertaining to see how the Bengals end up doing this entire celebration throughout the year. Obviously, they'll probably be bringing players on the field in pregame type of situations during the regular season, doing some stuff in the preseason and decorating the stadium, I would assume, all of that sort of thing. So for those who had not had that the pleasure of reading or hearing some of the snippets from Corey Dillon and Paul Dehner Jr. of the Cincinnati Enquirer, pretty entertaining stuff, pretty interesting stuff, and especially for those of us that remember some of the dog days of Bengals football. And what's also interesting with Corey Dillon is he left, and he kind of sort of demanded a trade, and or Marvin Lewis kind of said, well, this is a disgruntled player. We now have Rudy Johnson waiting in the wings, who had a productive year in 2003, kind of splitting time with Dillon. And it's just kind of funny how some of that stuff worked out. If you remember, Takeo Spikes was a guy who was a free agent going into 2003 when Marvin Lewis was there. Marvin Lewis tried to talk him into re-signing with the club. Spikes wouldn't have it. And so those guys kind of missed out on that 2005 year, 2009 potentially, if they ended up staying that long. They kind of missed out on some better days of Bengals football and really could have been big parts of that turnaround. And who knows? I mean, they could have been guys that could have really helped that 2005 playoff game. They could have helped in 2004 to get the team to the playoffs. Spikes could have been a guy that helped out that 2003 team that just missed out on getting to the playoffs. So, I understand, and I think a lot of fans understood where they were coming from at that time. But, they also kind of missed out on some things with the Bengals, potentially. Dylan did get that Super Bowl ring, which was great for him. But kind of an interesting scenario. Check out what he had to say via the Cincinnati Enquirer. Corey Dillon is going to be honored by the team in this 50 and 50 celebration they'll be doing this year. So kind of a little bit of news and notes surrounding the team as they are getting going into training camp. As I mentioned at the onset of the show, I will. It appears that I'll be going solo tonight. So I would love to hear. We're getting some good activity in the YouTube chat. I would love to hear from all of you. Hear some questions. Hear some comments. That sort of thing. We do listener questions almost every episode, and that's something we love to do on this program. So I'm going to rely on you for some of the content at the end of this show. And like I said, I appreciate you guys tuning in live and downloading this program every episode. You can find it at Cincy Jungle. You can find it on YouTube. You can find it on SoundCloud, iTunes. We're doing a lot of different things with the show, and we're going to be tweaking some things as well, we hope, as training camp starts. So we'll continue to update you on that and hoping to make the show better for you. If you have any feedback, leave it in the comments. Let us know. You can email the obinsider@gmail.com. You can let us know some questions or comments you have, or on Twitter at BengalsOBI, and we like to filter through those and check those out too. So if you can't join us live and you have questions, comments, or want to download the show, go check it out on all of those platforms there. For those of you who have been avid Cincy Jungle readers for a while and know that I've been with that site for a handful of years now, you might remember a series of posts that I put together, and it's usually around this time of year, especially into training camp, when we start seeing more players, more of these young guys, more playing time in games and practices from guys that either are very young on the spectrum and haven't had a lot of experience, or are guys who have been there for maybe a couple of years and just haven't quite lived up to expectations yet. But I usually do a kind of a top 10 potential breakout players of 2017 for the Bengals. And what I'm kind of going to do is I'm going to start doing these, and I'll do these with my co-hosts as well. We're going to start kind of doing these in video format, and then obviously putting them into a post and explaining all of that stuff as those go up. But I wanted to start with a guy that might be sort of predictable, because he might be slated for a starting role in 2017. And that's Andrew Billings, the defensive tackle that the team drafted last year. Now, if you remember, weight room monster in terms of all kinds of the power type of lifting that is required or really makes an effective defensive tackle. He looked really good in early parts of camp last year, and was going to be a guy that at a minimum was going to be a rotational type of player up front for the Bengals on that defense. Now, we all know the story. He hurt his knee and he was out for the rest of the year, and just a shame that his career kind of hit a major speed bump before it really got started. But in early portions of mini camp and training camp and whatnot, he looked every bit of the part of a guy who should have been a first or second round tackle. Bengals got him in the fourth round, kind of inexplicably, but he's back and looking to prove himself. He's probably going to be a guy that is going to be in there on the early downs this year. So he's probably not going to be a 3-down guy. At most, he'll probably be a 2-down guy, especially early on. But when you look at it, even though we haven't seen him really play a snap of significant NFL football, you look at the absolute power the Bengals potentially have up front in those early downs. Now, you look at a lot of fans right now are a little sour on Michael Johnson, just given the lack of quarterback sacks and that sort of thing, especially last season. Understandable, but still a an effective player at times and a guy that has length and power. You look at the other defensive end spot, you have Carlos Dunlap, a even more powerful guy, a guy with enormous wingspan as well, and can really push tackles back into the pocket. And then, of course, you have Geno Atkins, the guy who is the shortest and close to weight-wise being one of the smallest on the defensive line. And you've seen him with regularity push some of the squatty, strong interior offensive linemen back into quarterbacks' laps as well. And now you got Billings in there. And he's a huge guy in terms of stature. So there's a lot of power up front, and I think because of the surrounding talent that Billings has, namely Atkins right next to him, who's going to command a lot of double teams, I think Billings could be poised for a breakout year. Now, when we say breakout, it obviously all that stuff kind of it's up to interpretation. So am I saying Andrew Billings is going to be a Pro Bowl player in 2017? Not necessarily. I think he will be very effective. And even though the Bengals defense really picked things up towards the end of last year, if you remember, part of the reason, aside from some offensive inefficiencies and things like that, part of the reason that they struggled early in the season was because they couldn't stop the run. And it's something that they had always kind of prided themselves on, especially under Mike Zimmer. They've done a pretty good job of it under Gunther, but they struggled early in the season stopping the run. And I think Pico was in there, and he had a decent 2015 season, especially pressuring the quarterback. He was kind of overmatched at certain times, so you kind of wished that this huge guy, Andrew Billings, it could have been plugged in as a rotational guy, help out in the run game, as was his supposed forte in college at Baylor. I do want to say this. Part of the knocks on Billings in college were the fact that he seemed to be a quote unquote 2-down player, a guy that could only really play the run and, just wasn't a guy that really pressured the quarterback. Well, you look at, he had 8.5 sacks in 3 seasons with the Bears, 5.5 in the last season with them in 2015. So he's not completely ineffective at getting to the passer. Now, a big guy like that isn't going to be, a double-digit sack kind of guy every year or anything like that. But if he can stop the run with effectiveness and get freed up at times because of the other talent on the defensive line to get into the quarterback, maybe get a couple of sacks on the season, I think that's going to be huge for this team because, again, even though the defense played well down the stretch, you also saw a little bit of an inconsistency in terms of, well, comparative to previous years with this Bengals team. You saw a little bit of inconsistencies with the pass rush. So I think that Billings might be able to take advantage of some of these opportunities based on some of the surrounding talent there. He also, since he is a gigantic human being, he also will eat up space, could free up some of the other guys on the line, but also free up the linebackers. You have kind of an aggressive tackler that they've added in Kevin Minter, a guy that should be an upgrade over Ray Maualuga. You've obviously got Vontaze Burfict back, a guy who has a very high football IQ and a guy that can stop the run pretty well. So if he can kind of eat up space as well as some of those other guys up front, and even though he's not getting on the stat sheet, Billings should be an effective guy and possibly one of those breakout type of players for the Bengals. Again, not necessarily talking Pro Bowl, not necessarily talking one of the best defensive tackles in football, but a guy who could be a very good player on that defense and a guy that they could rely on and get some things out of that they didn't necessarily get the same things out of, whether it be Pecco or the other rotational guys in there. But as we mentioned on this program before too, that defensive tackle spot is going to be one of the most heated position battles of the summer at training camp. You've got Billings, who could be that quote-unquote starter. You've obviously got Atkins. You've got Marcus Hardison. You've got Deshaun Williams. You've got Brandon Thompson. You've got Pat Sims. You've got David Dean. All of these guys, and a lot of them seem to be effective players, whether they're mid or late round undrafted type of players. A lot of them seem to be guys who could be effective at the NFL level. So the Bengals have a lot to sort out there. Looking at some of the comments in the YouTube chat here, Tim Jones says, I think Billings will be an upgrade over Pecco and Sims. I think a lot of people think that. And I've always been a big Pat Sims guy, by the way. Always been a big Pat Sims guy. I think he's an underappreciated guy on this defense. I think he's played well, even as a rotational guy. He's played well in some of the team's biggest games. I remember him having quite a few nice plays against the Steelers. He's another guy who's a big space eater, and I'd like to see them hang on to him. But as I've said before, when you look at the battle of potentially of the veterans, if you will, the veteran backups, you look at Sims and Thompson. I don't know that they keep both of them. Maybe they keep one. Maybe they do keep both. But I think they are getting young. This team is getting younger. I don't know that they'll keep both Sims and Thompson. Thompson's been a kind of an up and down player, battled some injuries as well. So kind of interesting. Those are two interesting guys to watch. Greg L in the YouTube chat says, I like Sims though for a backup as well. I think that's obviously one of the position battles to watch. But I do think Andrew Billings is a guy that could break out in a pretty big way for the Bengals this year, especially in a division where you have a Le'Veon Bell. You've got Cleveland, who, for all their faults, they can still run the ball relatively well. And the offensive lines that the other teams in the AFC North present. I mean, again, we're talking about Cleveland. They added Zeitler. They have Joe Thomas. They've got a pretty good little line there. Baltimore is usually pretty decent. The Steelers are pretty good. So having those effective defensive linemen and having a big guy like Billings there, I think, is going to be a potential breakout player for the Bengals. And I think he might surprise some people when it comes to rushing the passer, like I mentioned before. If you think you've got some potential breakout guys, let us know. We're going to continue to be doing these over the next handful of weeks, and we'll also, as I mentioned, be posting these on Cincy Jungle. We'll probably be splitting these up, the audio snippets and whatnot as well. So download those, check it out on Cincy Jungle. But we're starting with Andrew Billings, maybe a little predictable when we talk about a possible breakout player, but you got to start somewhere, and I think he's a good place to start. So keep it glued here. We'll do some more potential Bengals breakout players of 2017. Again, we'll be doing some listener questions at the end of the show. So I'm doing the best I can on my own, guys. So hopefully I'm still remaining entertaining on my own, but I do want to get some questions from you all to end the show with. So please send those in the YouTube chat. Put them in the Cincy Jungle comment stream as well. I'll be checking those and answering some. Now, I did see one already that was interesting that I'm going to get to, but and it's from Derek Rogers, and it's regarding William Jackson. I'll get to that later, but it is a nice segue to the next segment that I'm going to get to. And by the way, I hope I pronounce this right. Amunkalikis does say William Jackson the third is my breakout player if they let him play. So, kind of sort of segueing here. Another thing that we're going to be doing on this show over the next couple of weeks is doing some bold predictions. And it's probably going to be something that we will do also throughout the season, probably, saying what a bold prediction as to what may happen in the game, who may shine, that sort of thing. But for now, we're going to do either, how a positional battle is gonna go, how a player will fare with the Bengals this year, a surprise cut, that sort of thing. I wish my co-host Scott Schulte was here. This was kind of his brainchild a little bit, but I still have one, and I'm sure it's going to be an unpopular one, but I'm going to give my reasonings for it. And you got to remember, bold predictions is kind of, you're taking a roll of the dice and kind of getting risky with what you're going to say. So what I'm going to go with is that I'm going to say that Darqueze Dennard will lead the team in interceptions. Now, hear me out on this. This is a big year for him. He's probably got one of the inside tracks on the slot corner position. If you look at Adam Jones, his interception numbers dipped last year, and Dre Kirkpatrick, I shouldn't say only had 3, but he had 3, so it's not where he was, putting up 6, 7, 8 interceptions, that sort of thing. The safeties each had a couple. There wasn't one player on the Bengals defense last year that really had a ton of interceptions. There wasn't the Reggie Nelson that would get your 5, 6, 7, 8 interceptions a year on the Bengals defense last year. Now, part of the reason that I went with this bold prediction, and again, it's, if you want to laugh at me, go for it. I'll relish it. But part of the reason I went with this is because teams are starting to either not throw the way of Adam Jones or Dre Kirkpatrick often, or they're getting the ball out kind of quickly against those guys to try and make a quick hitting pass. If you look at some of the Pro Football Focus metrics of last year, I have been a little bit further down on Adam Jones based on his performance last year than I guess I probably should, especially if you really ascribe to what PFF says, because I don't have the specific stats in front of me, but I believe it was something to the effect of he limited amount of yardage, passer rating, that sort of thing against opposing quarterbacks. Dre Kirkpatrick kind of did the same, showed improvement from 15 to 16. But again, another reason why I pointed to Dennard is Kirkpatrick in 2015 didn't have an interception all year. So, if a guy gets 3 or 4 interceptions on this defense, he could potentially lead the team, the defense in interceptions. So in that respect, it may not be that big of a stretch. However, he's got the inside track to the slot job. I do think that teams will be targeting him a lot if he's out there. I think he's going to be targeted a lot. Now, do I think William Jackson III has superior athleticism? And if he had a starting job or a role that doesn't look to be as a number 4 corner on this team, do I think would I make that prediction about William Jackson? Yes, I would. But I think teams utilize the slot a lot. I think in terms of offenses around the league, I think a lot of teams will target Darqueze Dennard because of his struggles, both with injuries and on the field. And it's a big year for him developmental-wise. I think he'll finally stay healthy. I think this is a year now where the team, they're going to look at it and, he's playing for that 5th-year option at this point. And, I think he's going to need to play pretty well in order to get another contract, get that option, that sort of thing. So I think that Dennard could theoretically, if things fall his way, could end up leading the Bengals in interceptions. It would probably be a bit of a stretch. You've got some, Burfict has had a couple of interceptions. You've got some good corners, as I mentioned, on the outside. But I think just because of targets, maybe opposing quarterbacks limiting their looks on the outside to those corners there, as well as the safety help that they get at times, perhaps Denard could be the benefactor of that. I have not looked at the comments yet, and there's a couple of good ones. As Royal Flush would 513 said, part of the reason the interception number was low is because the lack of quarterback pressure provided by the defensive line. It's a good point. Yep, it's a very good point, and I think hopefully that will improve. And as you noticed, the interceptions came a little bit more frequently towards the middle and end of the year once the pressure got a little bit better and was a little bit more effective. So that's a great point. Gavin Ross says Aloka leads the team in interceptions in his second year at free safety. You look at some of the others. Amon Kalikis is just, I love it. I wouldn't throw towards Pac-Man or Dre if Denard was on the field either. True, and he also follows it up with, I'll bet you 20 juice boxes that William Jackson III will have more interceptions than Denard. Well, depends on what kind of juice boxes we're talking about, but yeah, I'll take you up on a bet. That's fine. I don't know what your flavor is. I don't know if you're like a Capri Sun guy or whatever, but maybe we can get them to sponsor the bet. That'd be pretty funny. Justin Tabor says he's only started 4 because when he gets in, he's been toasted. Yeah, and that's part of the issue with Denard. He's either hurt or he's been out there and hasn't made the plays. So that's why I think this is going to be kind of even though it's interesting to say, because even though he was known in the draft as being one of the safest players, one of the most solid players, perhaps the best corner coming out of that draft, this is kind of a boomer bust year for Denard, and it's the contract stuff I talked about. He's now in his 4th season, and it's kind of do or die for him at this point. I think you saw some improvement from Josh Shaw, both as a slot guy, a little bit on the outside. He's kind of a neat little Swiss Army knife type of secondary player the team can use in a lot of different ways. So he's got some guys breathing down his neck. Jackson obviously was drafted in the 1st round last year. Jackson to me is more he's just more suited to the outside, so I don't see a ton of work from him in the slot. He's kind of got that longer long range speed, that sort of thing that might be better suited on the outside. That doesn't mean he won't play in the slot, but like I said, he's got at least 3, potentially 4 if the coaches think Shaw's more ready to play than Jackson. Jackson's looking at 3 or 4 guys probably in front of him, Denard being one. I know it's a long shot, guys. Tim Jones, Denard's new nickname, Juice Box. I love it. Capri Sun's fine. Okay, we'll get some Capri Sun going. That's my bold prediction for this week. Got some great comments on it. And, if you have certain bold predictions you want to share with us every time we do this segment, if you got them now, go for it. I'd love to read them on air. And, yeah, I'll if they're good, I have no problem reading stuff on the air. I saw some stuff, some listener questions here, and one was the let's see, it was about William Jackson. I believe it was sorry, I'm trying to look for it here. And it was Andrew and the Cat Fives. Will William Jackson III possibly be better than Pac-Man? Yes. Will he start? Not a chance. Due to Marvin Ball. And there was another question that followed up with it, as I mentioned a little earlier, that basically asking to the effect of, what's William Jackson III's role going to look like in 2017? Could he maybe start? Could he? As one of the listeners noted, I don't see William Jackson having a high profile role this year with the team, and it's a shame because I do agree with Andrew there. I think he has the potential of being the best corner on this team in terms of athletic ability, in terms of a big play ability. I mean, if you go back to his college tape at Houston, there were plays where he just wows you. And obviously he ran the I believe it was a 4.3 40. And I think he was more technically sound coming out of college than Dre Kirkpatrick was. And Dre's developed, into a nice corner, and he's starting for them. I would say Jackson would have had a much higher profile role if the Bengals had decided to move on from Adam Jones. And they did not decide to do that from this off-season incident. Perhaps if there's some sort of suspension that ends up coming his way or something like that, perhaps Jackson could step in for, a week or two or whatever and either start or get some more snaps. But I think this is going to be kind of another red shirt type of role this year for Jackson. And on one hand, I kind of like it just because we're not talking about a guy who was healthy his entire rookie season and got out there and kind of got adjusted to the speed of the game and all of that. It's a guy who missed the entire year, and now he's back. So I'd kind of be more comfortable with it if he actually had some experience built up last year, but as of now, he does not. So, I think the sky's the limit for the guy. I really like the player. I don't see 2017 being a big year for him. That doesn't mean I could definitely be wrong about that, but I see him being a guy that is going to kind of be mired, down the pecking order a bit in the cornerback depth chart. There was, just to go back a little bit on some bold predictions, I saw Tim Jones, Dalton throws for over 4,300 yards. Gavin Ross, Dalton is in the MVP conversation. Sad and bold prediction, Erickson is picked up by the Patriots and gets 2 kick return touchdowns. That's funny. Eifert playing Royal Flush 5-1-3. Eifert playing 2 full games could be a very bold prediction. That's pretty funny. I see a lot of talk too about the tight end position, and I want to there's not a specific listener question on that, but I saw a comment about CJ Uzoma. I see some stuff about Tyler Eifert in there, and this is something I'm curious to also hear about how listeners feel about the tight end position for the Bengals this year. That one's kind of a boomer bust type of situation for me as well, when you look at who they have and kind of what these guys that they currently have done. I was kind of a little bit of a proponent of maybe the Bengals want to use one of those mid-round picks that they had in this year's draft on a tight end that could potentially supplant a guy like Tyler Kroft, maybe a developmental guy. They got Mason Schreck in the 7th round, probably going to be a practice squad guy. But if you remember when Joe Goodberry was on the show, he actually really likes Mason Schreck as a long-term prospect. So we'll see if something works out there. But I'm a little nervous about the tight end spot on this year's team, only because we know the deal with Eifert, and he's coming off another injury. He's recovered. He's probably going to be ready for training camp, we think. But we also know it's kind of funny. I had a game that was recorded that I ended up rewatching recently, and every time I noticed every time he gets a catch and gets tackled, I almost hold my breath, even though these are old games. I already know what happened. But it's the same thing with the live games. Just because you know what a talent he is and you know what kind of injury issues he's had with this team, and he's so critical to the offense. So I worry about him. Uzoma showed some nice progress last year. He stepped in a few times for Eifert and made some plays here and there. Again, he was a guy that was really raw when they drafted him, so it was good to see him kind of make some nice strides in his second year. Croft, to me, has been a disappointment. I'm not seeing the infatuation there. I would like to believe that he's going to make another leap this year, but he's not a huge receiving threat at this point in his NFL career. He's an okay blocker. That's kind of all you can really say about him. And though the Bengals don't use multiple tight ends, they do at times, but not as much as other teams. And though they use Eifert frequently, I still think that position group could have used some help in the draft. And I might be alone on that. When I've written about it on Cincy Jungle, I've kind of received kind of lukewarm sentiments on it, but I do think that the team probably needs to replenish that spot a little bit. Now you've got Eifert potentially hitting free agency next year, and you want to give him an extension this summer, but it's probably got to be something that's incentive laden because of all the injuries, and it's a tough position to figure out. Luckily, the team kind of replenished the wide receiver group over the past couple of years with the losses there. They've got a lot of good running backs. So there's some help there. And I'm not saying these guys are bad players by any stretch. Eifert or Croft is one I'm kind of iffy on, but they're good when they're out there. And Uzoma, as I mentioned, he had a pretty decent year stepping in for Eifert last year, but he also missed 6 games with injury. So unfortunately, that position is just a very physical position that takes a lot of big hits across the middle. They are asked to block, so there's some hitting in that aspect. So they're a little vulnerable in terms of how they use their body in the sport, but they got to get guys that are out there often. And the Patriots have experienced some of the same stuff with Rob Gronkowski. They've been able to get past it. The Bengals, they have and they haven't. Unfortunately, they also lost AJ Green, Giovanni Bernard last year. So there was a lot of weapons that were missing. Hopefully that doesn't happen again this year, but that's a spot I'm a little worried about. There's been some talk of it in the YouTube chat, and I'm a little worried about it. I'm a little worried about it, but if Eifert can manage to play, those 12, 13, 14 games, maybe just gets nicked up here and there and misses a game or two, I think he will have another very productive season. It's just a matter of that big if. And that's unfortunately the question that the team is looking at right now, because they're obviously interested in re-signing him and getting him locked up long term, but that's a big if at this point. I see some couple other bold predictions. I see very bold prediction. The offensive line performs better than last year. Now that would be, we've talked about the offensive line at length on this show so far, but that would be huge for this team. And I think everybody kind of realizes that is this team's biggest weakness as it currently stands. If they play better than they did last year, look out. This team could be if they play better than they did last year and they stay healthy at their key spots, their stars stay healthy, all of that, look out. This team could be very good if that prediction comes through. Michael Myers, playoff win. Yes, that is a bold one. Bold prediction, Margus Hunt has more sacks than Michael Johnson. Ooh, that would be interesting. And for those who don't remember, Margus Hunt is no longer with the Bengals. He's with the Colts. The Bengals opted to not re-sign him. That would be very interesting. Very interesting indeed. Bold prediction: 2 Bengals earn All-Pro honors. Not so bold. It will be Green and Perfect. Okay. This is a good one too. Bold prediction: Russell Bodine bounces under 1.5 shotgun snaps. I think a lot of people would take the over on that. Rehashing, Mr. Sinister said he's more worried about Sean Williams at safety. Well, if you haven't yet, Mr. Sinister, go check out last week's episode and/or the mailbag post that's on Cincy Jungle. We have a video and audio clip. We talked about Sean Williams. There's also a little write-out of Sean Williams, and so check that out. We did note last week, Scott and I, that he has shown improvement, and that's something that I think everybody likes to see. But obviously there's some different stuff that's going on there, and he'll have to show that long term. But go check that out so we don't readdress it all the 2 shows in a row there. Derek Rogers asks, will John Ross be ready to go for training camp? I believe so. Been a little quiet on that front. Should be ready, I think, at least for regular season. So been a little quiet, but once we know more, we'll update you on that. Micah Herring says, bold prediction: no one will have a major injury during training camp. That would be a welcome one. Unfortunately, we talked about Billings. He had one last year. William Jackson did. The year before, I believe it was the year before when they re-signed Michael Johnson. He had a knee injury that kept him out the entire preseason. So if they can get through training camp and preseason relatively injury-free, that would be great. I will say this, with the rule change now being that there's one final cut-down day and there's not multiple cut-down days, I will say those guys kind of fighting for a roster spot, guys who won't make the team, I hate to say that, those guys will probably be getting much more playing time in the preseason than some of your stars, even more so than before. So hopefully in those games, you're saving your best players, you're resting them, all of that. Another bold prediction: 13-3 with a bye. That's a good one. So I think that's going to wrap it up for tonight, guys. We're doing a little abbreviated show again. I was on my own, and I appreciate greatly all of the feedback from you, all of the questions, all of the comments. I wanted to make this one super interactive, so it doesn't make it sound like I'm just monologuing for 45 minutes or an hour or however long it's been. But I appreciate all the interaction. I appreciate all the feedback, all of the questions, all of the comments. I know it's been a little bit of a different show. I appreciate you tuning in live here at YouTube and at Cincy Jungle. Again, all of our content is on YouTube, is on SoundCloud, is on iTunes. You can get it at Cincy Jungle. You can get in touch with the show on Twitter at BengalsOBI and via email, the obinsider@gmail.com. We'll be continuing to bring you content. Obviously, there's going to be a lot more to talk about in the next few weeks, and especially with training camp coming up. A lot more to talk about, a lot more discussion to be had. And like I said, we'll be doing some different stuff with the show. We'll be bringing on just a couple of updates. We're looking to bring on more guests, both as co-hosts and guests to that cover the Bengals, that cover the teams that they play through the preseason and regular season. So we'll have some of those. I said potentially guest co-hosts. We'll be kind of doing some other fun things, some analysis, and obviously still taking your questions. I mentioned on last week's show, we're looking to do a couple of improvements. We'll hopefully, I don't want to overpromise and underdeliver, but I'm looking to also get this program on Google Play. So if you're not on iTunes and you do Google Play, we're looking to get on there. We're also looking to add some form of a phone number for you guys to call in and do the listener questions, not only in the chat, not only on Cincy Jungle, but call in and talk to us if you wanted to chat with us live on the air. We're looking to establish that too. So just a couple of things, hopefully around the corner with the program. Thanks for your continued support. Thanks so much. This is a passion project. We're all passionate about the Bengals. We love doing this, and it's so cool to see not only new names, but familiar names every week tuning in live. Please, if you're able, continue to tune in live. If not, download the show. We appreciate it. We'll see you next time on the Orange and Black Insider. I'm Anthony Cosenza. Take it easy.